Welcome, and thanks for joining us here at the Urban Herald. Today we're doing a really intensive deep dive into something pretty special. It's this intersection of visual art and, well, premium TV, the Amazon Prime series Tales from the Loop.
Yeah, and this isn't your standard streaming show. Definitely not. We've been digging through the sources, and what really comes through is that people see this show as almost like emotional archaeology.
Emotional archaeology, I like that.
Right. It gets called an Amazon Prime hidden gem a lot. And you see phrases like pure melancholic beauty used to describe how it translates Simon Stålenhag's art, from the digital canvas to the screen. It's quite something.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because the whole thing really starts with the artist, the Swedish artist Simon Stålenhag. Not in a typical TV writer's room. And his work seems to hinge on this one really evocative question. What happens when something totally otherworldly, the technological sublime, just sort of bleeds into everyday life permanently?
And his paintings are the answer, aren't they? These massive, complex machines, but they're often broken down, rusting away quietly in forests or fields.
Right, while kids just bike past them like it's nothing.
Exactly. So our mission today here at the Urban Herald is to really understand that process. How did they take these incredibly still, haunting images and turn them into television that, well, it asks for patience, a lot of patience.
And rewards it, hopefully.
It definitely rewards it. It's contemplative stuff.
So for you listening, especially if you like getting up to speed quickly but, properly, thoroughly, we're going to lay out the structure, give you the key facts, the surprising bits that help explain why this series feels so different from your usual sci-fi fare.
Yeah, it really trusts you, the viewer. It asks these big existential questions rather than just feeding you plot twists.
Okay, so we absolutely have to start at the source. The art itself, this alternate reality that Simon Stålenhag created on his digital canvas, it's world-building, but really subtle.
It is. And to get the world, you've got to understand the place, the geography. Stalenhag, born in '84, right? His whole artistic universe is just so deeply rooted in where he grew up.
Which was Märsta, near Stockholm.
Märsta, yeah. A rural area just outside Stockholm. And that landscape, flat, maybe a little desolate, these sudden bits of industry popping up that became the kind of spiritual homeland for the Loop universe.
That tension is palpable in the art. The quiet countryside, and then, bam, a giant robot.
Exactly. That constant push and pull between the pastoral and the industrial. That defines it.
And his influences are fascinating, too. It's such an odd mix. You've got the quiet realism of this Swedish wildlife artist, Lars Jonsson. His watercolors, very focused on light and nature.
Very grounded, yeah.
But then that gets smashed up against these titans of sci-fi design. Ralph McQuarrie, Star Wars concept art.
Iconic.
And Sid Mead, Blade Runner, Kron, these huge speculative visions.
Yeah, and that collision, the quiet nature painting, meets the giant spaceship design. That's the heart of the retro future look, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And his technique, that's really worth digging into. He's mainly working in Photoshop, but the output feels so hyper-real yet dreamlike. It's all down to this incredibly careful layering. It's like digital painting aiming to feel like old oil.
It's way more intense than just digital sketching. We found out he uses this massive archive of photos, over 45,000 reference photos.
45,000. Think about that. Just images he snapped himself on walks around his home turf in Sweden. These aren't just like inspiration boards. They're the actual texture baked into the work.
So he paints over the photos.
Correct. The sources say he paints over them, uses texture overlays, digital brushes, plays with the light, all to make sure the final image has that painterly feel.
Yeah.
It never looks like a cold 3D render.
It looks analog, like you could hang it on a wall.
Precisely. He uses the real photo to ground the impossible thing, the giant robot, the weird machine.
And apparently his reason for starting this whole world was just creative procrastination.
Yeah, kind of funny, isn't it? He had a day job at a gaming company, and on weekends, he'd post these sketches online. He said it was just to capture all the weird personal stuff he couldn't really explore at work.
That's actually really telling.
It's hugely important that the Loop started as this side project for his weird personal stuff. It means the heart of it is memory, personal expression, not just trying to make something commercial.
Which is maybe why it connected with people so fast? Tapped into something subconscious?
I think so. That shared feeling of technological anxiety, but seen through the lens of childhood memory, it's potent.
The specific memory meeting that universal dread. Okay, that leads us right into the philosophy behind it all.
Yeah, because if you connect the technique to the bigger ideas, Stalenhag's look isn't just cool robots. It's a pretty profound statement about technology, progress, and how everything human eventually decays.
Right, the decay. That's why the setting is so specific, isn't it? The 80s and 90s.
Deliberately.
Using all that analog tech, VHS tapes, CRT monitors, those clunky cars and computers, it creates this weird time paradox. The tech is super advanced and function like body-swapping pods, but it looks completely outdated, rusty, static-filled, always breaking down.
That's critical. His machines aren't gleaming, perfect things like in most modern sci-fi. They rust, they corrode, they fall apart, just like an old tractor left in a field or, an abandoned swing set.
It speaks to that deep anxiety about technology, doesn't it? The fear that even our biggest, most hopeful inventions will just fail, become junk, left for the next generation to climb on.
Exactly. It's technological debris.
Okay, but here's the bit I find really fascinating. The core principle driving his work, this idea of studied normalization of the extraordinary, that's what makes it feel so different.
Absolutely, because traditional sci-fi, it makes a big deal of the reveal. Think the first time you see a Star Destroyer or the flying cars in Blade Runner. It's about explaining the wonder, creating awe.
Stalenhag just doesn't do that.
He refuses. He shows these massive, impossible cargo ships floating over suburban streets or kids walking right past these towering, silent robots, as if they're just telephone poles. Mundane facts of life.
Like mailboxes.
Yeah, exactly. Just part of the landscape.
And that casualness, that indifference from the people in the paintings, that's what creates the dissonance for us, the viewers. We're screaming, what is that? How does it work? Why is it there?
But the kids in the picture, they don't care. They just live with it.
And that gap, our need for answers versus their lack of interest, that's where the power comes from.
That's the engine. He talked about creating art for his 12-year-old self, tapping into that feeling of glimpsing some forbidden adult mystery without quite getting it, that adolescent vertigo.
As the mystery is the point.
It absolutely is. This deliberate ambiguity, refusing to explain, the loop, the tech. It forces you, the audience, to fill the gaps with your own feelings, your own memories, your own anxieties. It trusts you to find meaning in the silence instead of spoon-feeding you exposition.
Which must have completely dictated how they approached the TV show.
Immediately. The tech couldn't be the plot device or the bad guy. It had to be the setting. Indifferent, decaying, just the emotional backdrop for these small, very human stories about grief, connection, regret. It's the difference between spectacle and exploring a place emotionally.
Okay, so the challenge then becomes huge, right? How do you take these paintings, defined by quiet, frozen moments, and give them the rhythm of television without just losing that core melancholy?
Well, it seems to have started with a director, Mark Romanek. He'd done things like Never Let Me Go, so he had that sensitivity for character-driven stories.
Right.
And apparently when he first heard the idea for the show, his reaction was just immediate. I know those paintings. Those paintings are amazing. That artistic buy-in was key from the start.
So he teamed up with the showrunner, Nathaniel Halpern, and the cinematographer, Jeff Cronenweth. And the task wasn't just adapting, it was transposing.
Exactly. Transposition. Halpern had this crucial insight. They realized trying to just recreate specific paintings frame by frame wouldn't work. They're too static, too self-contained emotionally.
Wouldn't feel like a story.
Right. So instead, they decided to use the paintings as emotional touchstones. They'd create totally new stories, focus on characters that felt like they could happen in Stalenhag's world. They'd look at a giant rusty machine and ask, okay, who found this? And what emotional journey did it trigger for them?
And they moved the setting, too. The books are Sweden, but the show's in Mercer, Ohio.
Mercer, Ohio. Fictional town. This Americanization was key, it seems, to tap into that specific feeling of quiet decay and isolation you find in parts of the American Midwest. Keeps the mood right.
But they didn't film it there.
No, they filmed in Winnipeg, Canada. The landscapes in Manitoba, flat, wide open, kind of isolated. They chose that specifically because it mirrored the feel of the Swedish landscapes in the paintings. That sense of huge space where these weird objects can just loom, feel separate.
And the structure of the show itself echoes the art books, being an anthology.
Each episode is mostly standalone, like looking at individual paintings in a gallery. They all add up to this bigger feeling, this shared world, but you don't need a complex, series-long plot connecting every dot.
Which was vital for keeping that mysterious, slightly disconnected vibe from the art.
Totally. It allows for that slower, more contemplative pace. And the whole production sounds like it was genuinely collaborative. They'd build out details, interiors, costumes based on Stalenhag's aesthetic. And crucially, if they got stuck on a design choice, they'd actually go back to Stalenhag himself.
Really?
Yeah, he was like their final helper to get us out of a jam, as they put it, just to make sure everything felt true to the original vision.
That's great. It ensures it's not just copying the look, but extending the actual rules and feelings he set up. They managed to bring movement to the stillness without killing the mood.
Yeah, and you absolutely cannot talk about the show's visual success without diving into Jeff Cronenweth's cinematography. It really meant throwing out the standard playbook for Hollywood sci-fi visuals.
Definitely. I mean, this might be one of the most successful translations of fine art to TV, visually speaking. And it's because Cronenweth and the team, they weren't looking at Star Wars or whatever. They were studying European art cinema.
Bergman, Tarkovsky, Kulak.
Exactly. Ingmar Bergman's pacing, Andrei Tarkovsky's kind of spiritual weight, Krzysztof Kieślowski's emotional depth. These are not your typical references for American sci-fi.
No way. And that reference point explains so much about the show's feel. The deliberate slowness, it gives it this meditative, almost philosophical rhythm. The visual language always prioritizes mood, emotional isolation over just, quick cuts and action.
Yeah.
They were aiming for artistic weight.
Let's get into the technical side of how they got that painterly look, because it's really specific. They used large format sensors, Panavision Millennium DXL2 cameras. Why was that so important?
Okay, so large format sensors, they capture the image on a bigger physical area inside the camera. And that fundamentally changes how depth of field looks and feels. It let them use a really, really shallow depth of field almost constantly.
So things are out of focus a lot?
Yeah, but strategically. It became a storytelling tool. If you watch, the characters, the people are often tack sharp right in the foreground, isolated. But the background, the huge landscapes, the giant weird machines, it's soft, almost dreamlike, falling out of focus.
So the blurry background isn't just style, it's making the person feel isolated and the world feel vast and maybe unknowable.
Precisely. It emphasizes the human element against this overwhelming, mysterious backdrop. And they push that soft look even further with the lenses they chose, Panaspeeds and Primo 70s.
Why those?
Cronenweth wanted that combination specifically to make sure the sci-fi stuff, the robots and hovercrafts, didn't look stuck on. They needed to feel like they belonged in that soft, painterly reality to maintain that crucial, false sense of everyday life.
And then there's the color grading. Working with Ian Vertovec, they actively avoided that cold blue look that's everywhere in sci-fi.
Yeah, that was a foundational choice for getting that analog feel. They went for a natural color palette, lots of earth tones, yellows, golds. It creates that feeling of perpetual magic hour, that warm, late afternoon light that dominates Stalenhag's paintings.
It stops it feeling cold or digital.
Exactly. And technically, they did things like pulling the blues towards cyan and the greens towards yellow.
Okay, for someone listening, what does that actually do to the image? Pushing blues to cyan, greens to yellow.
It does two key things. Pushing blues towards cyan gets rid of that harsh, synthetic electric blue you associate with, like computer screens or futuristic lights. It feels softer, more filmic. And pushing greens toward yellow adds warmth, bit of nostalgia. It makes the landscapes feel almost like faded photographs from the 80s.
More like a memory.
Yeah, exactly. Less like a crisp digital stream, more like a preserved analog image. Ultimately, all these choices, the camera, the lenses, the color, they ensure the visuals serve the characters, not just the spectacle. And filming in Manitoba, those flat, wide-open landscapes let the giant machines be imposing without ever stealing focus from the quiet human dramas unfolding right in front of them. And this is where you really see the payoff of that art house approach to the visuals. It's in the stories they chose to tell. The look provides the world, the framework, but the emotional core comes from these really intimate human stories, often about tough stuff, regret, identity, deep grief, slow burn themes.
Yeah, let's look at some episodes. Episode 1, Loop. It sets the visual tone right away, introduces the huge underground particle accelerator, the loop itself. It looks spectacular, but the story is small. A boy, his distant mother, this mysterious voice he hears. The big sci-fi serves the personal story.
That framework lets them tackle these really high-concept sci-fi ideas, but ground them emotionally, like Episode 2, Transpose. Uses those body-swapping pods. You see weird paired machines like that in Stalenhag's work sometimes.
Right.
The tech itself is wild, but the story is totally focused on the human side.
Two boys switch bodies. But it's not just a gimmick, is it? There's social commentary baked in.
Definitely. One boy is from a more well-off background, the other's facing more economic hardship. When they swap, they suddenly have to confront all these invisible barriers, assumptions, class differences, how people treat them based on who they appear to be. It turns a sci-fi trope into this subtle look at empathy and social reality.
So how does the show handle something like grief? using these sci-fi tools.
Oh, episode 3, Stasis, is a
Yeah.
perfect example. And it's heartbreaking. A young woman finds this device that looks like junk, something pulled from a swamp, very Stalenhag, that lets her freeze time for short bursts.
So she uses it to steal these perfect frozen moments with her boyfriend.
Yeah, just these tiny pockets of stillness where everything is perfect. But then, inevitably, the device starts to fail. It breaks down. And the whole story becomes this devastating meditation on loss, on trying to hold on to time, knowing you can't. The sci-fi tech becomes a metaphor for that desperate human urge to stop change, to keep happiness from fading.
Wow.
Then episode 4, Echosphere. This one feels like a really direct translation of a specific pinking motif, that giant sealed metal sphere that shows up in his art.
I know the one.
In the show, it reveals how much time you have left by the number of echoes it gives back.
Heavy.
Very. But again, the adaptation uses this mysterious object not for suspense, but to explore mortality, legacy. It focuses on the relationship between a grandfather and his grandson, forcing them to think about the time they have and what echoes what legacy they'll leave behind. The sphere is visually stunning, but its function is purely emotional and intimate.
And even when kids and robots are involved, it's not what you'd expect. Episode 5, Control.
Right. It takes that classic Stalenhag image, these sort of abandoned, maybe slightly creepy childlike robots, and tells this incredibly tender story about motherhood. A woman has adopted one of these robots as her child, and when it starts malfunctioning...
It's not a horror story.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It becomes about her confronting these huge questions. What is consciousness? What makes something alive? What does maternal love mean when your child isn't biological or even organic? It completely sidesteps the creepy robot trope and goes straight for quiet devastation and philosophical questions about connection.
And episode 6, Parallel, seems to nail that approach of using tech to explore regret.
Reality-shifting tech, right,
Yeah.
hidden in everyday things.
Yeah, like a rusty old tractor suddenly becomes a gateway to another reality. But it's not used for some big multiverse adventure. It's focused on this lonely security guard, Gaddis.
He finds this parallel reality, and it's not drastically different. It's just slightly better. The Gaddis there is a bit happier, a bit more successful, a bit less lonely. And that subtle difference is what makes it so painful. It highlights all the what-ifs, the paths not taken. It turns sci-fi into this quiet drama about internal dissatisfaction.
And the finale, Home, directed by Jodie Foster, brings it all together with a time loop.
Yeah, it uses the ultimate sci-fi trope, the time loop, but focuses intensely on memory, love, loss. A young woman reliving parts of her life. It synthesizes all the show's themes, time, connection, memory, melancholy, without needing some big, explosive climax. It stays true to the emotional core.
So episode after episode is clear. The visuals, the atmosphere of quiet wonder and decay, that's the stage. But the stories are all about childhood meeting adulthood, hope meeting disappointment, and human connection somehow persisting even when the technology around it fails.
That's the essence of it, I think.
Now, how the show is received, that's almost a story in itself, isn't it? It really shows the split in streaming culture. Critics seem to love it.
Critics mostly praised it, yeah. They got the meditative vibe, the visuals, compared it to classics like The Twilight Zone for its thoughtful, standalone stories.
The general audiences.
Mixed,
Yeah.
famously mixed. And you can pretty much trace it directly back to that deliberate pacing. It's slow, and it refuses to give you easy answers or big plot twists every episode.
Which is exactly its strength, but also its challenge in today's market.
It's identity, but yeah, a commercial liability. You can't really binge watch it in the same way you'd inhale a thriller. It asks you to slow down, to sit with it, something the whole streaming ecosystem kind of fights against.
Interestingly, it came out in April 2020, right at the start of, well, everything.
Perfect timing, in a strange way. It became kind of the ideal pandemic television. Themes of isolation, anxiety about unseen forces, just quiet reflection. It resonated deeply with people who were suddenly forced into that same state of slow, uncertain waiting. It gave a visual language to that shared feeling.
So it's definitely art that makes you work a bit, not just passive entertainment. But Stålenhag himself, he hasn't stopped creating. The source material keeps growing way beyond that first Tales from the Loop book.
Oh yeah, the direct sequel book is Things from the Flood from 2016. And it shifts the mood quite a bit.
How so?
It moves into the 90s. The Loop facility itself is being decommissioned. The area is literally flooded in places. And the focus shifts from childhood wonder more towards teenage alienation. It follows kids navigating the actual debris, physical and metaphorical, of these broken technological promises. It's darker, heavier, More cynical, maybe?
From childhood hope to adolescent disillusionment.
Pretty much. And then came the Electric State in 2017. That one's a huge expansion, moves the action to an alternate 1990s America.
A road trip story.
Yeah, essentially. Following a teenage girl, Michelle, and her little yellow robot companion, Skip, across this desolate American landscape littered with the ruins of giant battle drones and weird VR tech remnants. It dives deep into themes of technological addiction, virtual reality as escapism. It's visually stunning, but also quite bleak.
And the Electric State is getting a big adaptation, right? Netflix.
It is, with the Russo brothers directing, Millie Bobby Brown starring. Which really shows that Stalenhag's unique vision, that blend of the deeply personal and the technologically bizarre, is finally hitting the mainstream, moving beyond the cult hit status of the Amazon show.
And his latest book, The Labyrinth, from 2021.
That one goes even further, more explicitly post-apocalyptic, even more surreal and dreamlike images. It feels like he's constantly evolving, pushing deeper into mystery, almost staying one step ahead of anyone trying to pin down easy explanations.
It's clear his influence goes way beyond just the shows based on his books. He's inspired a whole wave of digital artists, hasn't he? That blend of photorealism and sci-fi weirdness.
Absolutely. That technique is everywhere in concept art now.
Okay.
And Tales from the Loop, the series, it really proved something important, that TV can be a legitimate way to adapt fine art. Not just the story, but the mood, the atmosphere, the prioritization of feeling over plot mechanics. It's possible.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here? Tales from the Loop worked. It resonated not because it explained the giant robots or the weird science, but because it captured the feeling of the paintings. It fully inhabited that emotional world. It's a show that, it demands something from you. Your attention, your emotional investment. It refuses to just be background noise, that kind of comfort food TV we get so much of.
And I think the underlying message and maybe the philosophy is actually quite hopeful. In a melancholic way.
Yeah.
It suggests that even when our grand plans fail, when the tech rusts, and the future we dreamed of falls apart, that fundamental human need for connection, for wonder, for just quietly getting by, that remains.
The resilience is still there.
Exactly. The biggest shifts, the most profound moments happen not when the giant machine turns on, but in those quiet moments between people, recognizing their shared vulnerability, their shared humanity.
So for you listening, if you're looking for something genuinely different on streaming, something that feels handcrafted almost, this beautiful hidden gem, Tales from the Loop, it offers these incredible rewards, but you have to be willing to slow down, to just sit with the quiet, sit with the mystery. It might even change how you look at your own surroundings.
It definitely makes you look twice at that weird abandoned building on the edge of town or the strange configuration of power lines, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what impossible machine might be quietly rusting just over the horizon.
Okay, so here's a final thought to chew on. If Stalenhag uses rusting robots and decaying tech to capture our era's anxieties about progress and failure, what everyday object in your life right now, your phone maybe, your car, that little blinking router in the corner, what mundane thing will become the rusted relic that defines the anxieties, the broken promises of the next generation? Something to think about maybe as you start seeing your own world through the lens of someone else's beautiful, melancholic, painted dream.